this is Heather from Stamps Paper Love. Today I have a scrapbooking process video for you that I hope inspires you to tell your own stories. If you are interested in more scrapbooking inspiration, be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow the links in the video description to find me on Instagram and Facebook. This layout today is a family recipe layout, and I had decided on kind of a basic design with 3 photos on the left edge, and then I have another photo that I'm showing on the red paper right now that's going to kind of be the highlight photo. So I start by choosing some papers that I want to put along that left side. I've got that sheet of green. I think these papers are from the Handmade Love collection from Cartabella, and they worked very nicely with the colors in the photos. And there's also some red, which was pretty important to me, so we'll get to that a little bit later when I start talking about the story. Right now I'm just inking up all the edges of the pieces of paper that are on the photo mats and the background paper and the little strips of paper that make the border for the 3 photo strip. And I'm just picking some colors that go really nicely together. And I really liked this red polka dot paper and thought I might use it with the photo mat, and it just maybe was going to be a little bit too much red because I'd already picked a red floral that's behind that photo. So I end up taking a little strip of the polka dot paper and putting it along the edge along with a couple other strips of paper. And then I've got the green paper that has the 3 photos on it. It's got a yellow floral background, which I just really loved. I inked up all the edges, I believe using a brown color because the papers are kind of vintagey. The background paper is actually words for it's not food related or cooking related, but it's music. So that is a little bit off the topic of the recipe, but you don't end up seeing most of it anyway. I decide to mat the photos with a very narrow brown background just to help them come up off the green floral paper a little bit better. And then I decide to do some stitching on those strips of paper and all around the edge. The recipe is a recipe that my grandmother, who's in the upper left corner, recipe that she would always make. And as I was making the layout, just really started thinking a lot about things that reminded me of her. And she, for years and years and years, did a lot of sewing. So I knew that there had to be some sewing on the paper. And then I moved to getting ready for the title. I had a sticker that says family that's from Paper Studio that I got at Hobby Lobby. And then I have these letter stickers that I'm inking. Those are from Close to My Heart. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but they actually have a resist pattern on it. So they have a polka dot, and I used a red that matched the rest of the red papers. And then I found this sheet of paper from a Memory Makers or Making Memories paper pad. It was just a bunch of like loose leaf different shaped papers, and this one had a pretty scalloped edge with some nice vine floral type details. So I inked that up and used it as a base for my title that says Family Recipe. And I really liked how the colors went together. The green that's in the word family coordinates nicely with the green that is on the strip of paper that the 3 photo grouping is on. And the red goes nicely with the polka dot, especially because the resist is polka dotted as well. So I really like how that looks together. And true to my usual form, I usually get my letters set down and then I decide to move them. So that's kind of what I do. I start adding some things from the collection. There's a little, this is part of the backside of a, I don't know if it was a cut apart sheet or just a piece of pattern paper that came with the collection, but it says grandma on it, and it has some florals, and flowers are another thing that are often associated with my grandmother, as you just saw the big floral explosion, because I stopped the video for a little bit and found some paper flowers that I decided I was going to use for an embellishment. Here I am writing the recipe on a recipe card that came with the Handmade Love collection, so I decided to include that as well. And so I'm writing the recipe on here. The recipe is for kugel, which is a Lithuanian potato dish. It's primarily potatoes and bacon and salt, pepper, eggs, few other things that get all mixed together. And the process is not terribly time consuming exactly, but you grate the potatoes, and you can see the lower photo is of my daughter doing just that, and that is the hardest part of making the recipe, but she really did a great job hanging in there with that potential for grating your fingertips along with the potato, which is never a fun experience, but it definitely can happen. So I just finish up with the recipe, and the photo is going to end up going above that, and you are going to see me attach it to the page with, it's something called a flip flap that is also from Close to My Heart, and I end up messing up the position of the photo and mat on the plastic backing, so I end up having to tear that particular flip flap off and reattach a new one. So I think this was kind of before I reattached the new one, because I just set the photo aside and decided to do a little bit of embellishing before I figured out how I was going to fix that issue. I add a lot of these paper flowers. They're really pretty colors, pinks and blues, and I also add a button in the center of them because a grandmother who was a seamstress also had a button box. And I remember as a child going to my grandmother's house and sorting through the button box and just checking out what was in there and just having the best time seeing what treasures were in the button box. So this layout had to definitely have some buttons on it. And that really kind of came together nicely as the centers of the flowers. And I always stitch the centers of the buttons down, so there is a lot of stitching by hand for the buttons, as well as the machine stitching that I did along the edges. So I think I'm getting the flip flaps situated now. I had to position it a few times. It was kind of on the diagonal first, and I didn't like how it covered up the photos on the photo strip, so I re-straightened it out a little bit, and I think at this point it's pretty well set. I added on the flower there. That's a flower that I got years ago from Prima, and it has a little pearl center to it, and I added on some little tiny doilies, which are another thing that I often associate with my grandmother. And there's a little stick pin that I'm not sure if I've added yet or not, but that will come up later, that I put next to that Prima flower as well. There were a lot of stickers on the sticker sheet that were super cute, and I really loved them, but it wasn't really a baking recipe, so I didn't end up using too many of the things on the sticker sheet. I instead go find some other ephemera pieces that I had laying around. There's a little piece of red lace. There's a rose piece that I use. The doilies definitely remind me of my grandmother, and so I added doilies to a few places on the layout as well. And they add a nice little texture that I enjoy too. I can never get too much texture on a layout, and I don't always want to do a lot of mixed media, so some of these other elements help adding with that texture and dimension on the page. So I'm just going to continue adding some embellishments, mostly flowers. I do a lot of little groupings of the flowers and keep plugging away at it, adding the buttons, adding the stitching until I decide that I am happy with it. And I really, really am so excited about how this layout turned out. I love that photo of my grandma that was actually taken just a couple of years ago, and she was at her home. I think my mom took that photo, so it was a nice little addition to the layout along with the photos of my daughter making the recipe just this past Thanksgiving. I decided that on the back of the photo, when you flip it up, it was going to need some additional journaling there. And so I'm just making a mat right now for the journaling that's going to go on this little Project Life card that I trimmed down so it would have a nice spot on the back for the journaling. And I went ahead and inked up all those papers so that it kind of just matches the theme of the rest of the layout. I end up sticking the journaling card onto the paper, and the first thing that I do is put the wrong date at the top of it. So I take that card off, and then I end up getting a new one, and then I'm doing my journaling, and it says Megan asked to make kugel for Thanksgiving this year. For most of my life, my grandma has been the kugel maker. She now lives in assisted living and can no longer do the cooking. I was happy to teach Megan how to make it. She did a great job and survived grating the potatoes by hand. It was delicious. So that, just kind of wraps up the story and tells what it was all about. I really was excited a little bit that Megan wanted to learn how to make kugel. She's not a huge cooker, recipe maker, and anyway, she likes to bake and do things like that. But as far as meal items, that's not generally her thing. She is more of a simple ramen noodle kind of girl. I decide that I need to add something on the edge of the photo to cover up the edge of the recipe that sticks out a little bit. And I also add a little tab that says to lift for the journaling. So I put the little doily there and then add the little tab on that tells people to lift for the journaling. I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to engineer the page protector so that that part can flip up. But at this point, I'm pretty much done with the layout, and it really is one of my favorites at this point. So I'm so thankful that you joined me today. I hope you found my video helpful and inspiring. Don't forget to like the video and be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the future videos that I'm planning. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Until next time, have a great day and be sure to get some time in telling your own stories.